Okay, so thanks for joining us today. So this week we've been looking at how we can use Boardmaker 7 to support behaviour in the classroom. So we've looked at a range of different resources that we've got available, and we have yesterday learnt some of the kind of technical skills of how to create some of those resources. So today what we're going to do is we're going to focus on how we can use these resources to support our learners. And I'm going to break this down into a number of different steps. So first one is that we need to understand and review the different types of behaviour supports that are available. So we can teach behavioural expectations systematically, and we can reinforce those expectations consistently in a positive way. And using these types of support, can help soften the triggers so that when an individual does not need to use that challenging behaviour to get their needs met anymore. So we need to make sure that when we're kind of thinking about these supports, that they are visual and concrete, that they are at the appropriate language and cognitive level for our students, that we are really thinking about what is the reason behind this behaviour, so that we're really targeting that reason behind. We need to make sure that these supports are easily accessible, that we use them in all environments. So we know that consistency is key, and we know that a lot of our students need lots of support for generalising some of their skills as well. So we need to make sure that we're using the same strategies in lots of different environments, whether that be in school, at home. And we need to make sure that the strategies and supports that we're using are actually empowering the individual that we're trying to support. So next thing that I want us to consider is matching the right kind of support to maybe the behaviours that we are experiencing. So I'm going to take you through a really useful tool that we've got available in Pathways, where we can match different behaviours to support. So it'll help us to really target that meaning behind the behaviour. So we talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the week, but Pathways is a free app that's available on iOS and Windows that anybody can download. And there's loads and loads of resources available in there. But today we're going to look at the Build Skills section. Once in the Build Skills section, there's a section down the bottom that looks at encouraging positive behaviour. And in there is a section, where we can match the supports for our challenging behaviour. So what this will do is it'll basically give us a tick list of some of the most kind of common challenging behaviours that we see. And what you can do is you can tick the ones that you would like to address, and it will suggest supports and communication tools that will help support that. So all you do is you go through, you select the ones that are appropriate, click on the next arrow, and then it's going to give you some suggestions for each of those. So here, for example, I selected that this individual has difficulty with changes or transitions. So it's suggesting a couple of different options here that we can maybe use a first and then board. We can use a mini schedule, or even maybe something like a social narrative or social script. And here it will give you a bit of a description of what each of those is, and maybe even some examples. And then it'll give you those suggestions for each of the kind of behaviours that you selected on there. So a really, really useful tool to make sure that we are using the right kind of support for that individual and for those kind of challenges that we're coming across. And it's really worth kind of thinking about this, because obviously, you know, there are lots of different types of supports out there, and we know that everybody's individual. So it's worth really kind of trying to figure out exactly what would work for that person. So the next step is creating and customizing those supports. So we looked at lots of different types of supports that we could create. So such as these kind of sequencing, these kind of choice boards, these behavior charts, reward charts, first and then, and things like these visual schedules. So we looked at the different skills that we kind of learned yesterday. So making sure that we are maybe using templates for ease of use, making something quickly, thinking about the types of symbols that we're using, or even images. So if images or photographs would work better for our individuals, we need to make sure that we're providing the right images for that person. So I might have one student that works really well with symbols, but another student that actually could maybe use the same support, but would work better with maybe photographs or a different type of symbol. So really thinking about how we can create that support and make sure it's really customized to that individual to make sure that it supports them. The next step is thinking about access. I think this is a really, really important one. So we need to think about where will they be available. So I think this can be quite an important one of thinking about. I've had quite a lot of kind of conversations with parents and schools where they've said, parents might say, well, we're experiencing these behaviours at home and we're really struggling with them. And school will say, well, we don't really experience that. And well, it might actually just be that they don't experience the same challenges because maybe they've got some of these supports in place that parents or carers don't have access to at home. So we're really thinking about, okay, where is this student going to need these supports, and are they available in those different locations? Same with who. So who is going to be working with the students and who's going to be supporting students? Do all of those people have access to these same support? So it's even thinking about things like, well, we use the support in class, but what about when they go to lunchtime? Could maybe the lunchtime supervisors have access to some of these supports as well? What about maybe when they go out and do physiotherapy or speech and language therapy, could they do with having access to these same supports as well? And then finally, thinking about access is how is the student going to use them? So could it be that we have them printed and laminated? We might have something attached to a lanyard that we can take around with us. It might be that they're stuck up on the wall of different rooms that we use. Or maybe it is that we want to think about accessing them more interactively. So this could be where we can think about using something like the Boardmaker Student Centre. And this would allow us to use our activities interactively. So basically means that they can go wherever we go as long as we've got our iPad or our students' communication device. So it's going to allow us to play those assignments. It's going to allow us to put it on any device that we want to use. And then importantly here as well, it might be that we need to consider the access method of our students. So the low-tech stuff might be quite good for those that can kind of reach out and touch, but what about those that maybe need to access with eye gaze or switch? This is where we can really make sure that our students have got access to those, maybe on their communication device or something that's available to them within the classroom. So the Student Centre's got a number of different things in it. So it's got loads of ready-made stuff that you can get started with in the Activity Centre. So it's got things like access games that we can maybe use for assessment. It's got emergent games. So maybe if we want to use some of this as a reward for some of our students, this might be something that they'd be interested in. We've got some really nice tools like maths tools like dice and spinners. And then we've got some examples of things like Reading Avenue and Core First Learning and a couple of our other instructional solutions as well. Now, of course, if you've got your subscription and you've created activities, then you will be able to access them via this as well. So if you're signed into the Student Centre as a teacher, you will get access to the classroom. So in there, you will be able to access a playlist. So you as a teacher can have all that you want to go through within the lesson or within the day or within the week ready to go, rather than playing it through the editor or having to hunt around to find activities quickly. So you can basically say, okay, today we're going to be working with so-and-so, and I'm going to have all of these supports ready so that we can use them throughout the day. Or we may have access via My Students. So this will show all of our students what assignments they've got for maybe one-to-one intervention. So maybe I'm going to bring somebody over and do some one-to-one work with them, and I can access their activities through their students. And of course, we can also use the Student Centre signed in as a student. So this will give the student access to all the assignments that have been that the teachers have given them access to. So let's say that we've been supporting a student in school with some support, and we want them to have access to that at home. So what we can do is we can create, through our subscription, a free student account for them. That will give them a login and a password. And then me, as the teacher or the instructor, can then assign all the different supports or activities to them. So it can then be downloaded and accessed on their device. So it could be their communication device or an iPad that they've got home, and then means that they can access the exact same supports that they've been using within classroom, outside of the classroom. So at home, on day trips, at respite, anywhere really where they might need to access that. So finally, just want to give some kind of reminders of how we, top tips really, of what we want to do when we're using these. So we need to make sure that these supports are going to be available all of the time. So we know that using some of these supports can prevent some behaviours from occurring in situations. And so we need to be aware of this, and we need to make sure that we've got these available at all times so that we can use them in order to prevent this behaviour from happening. We need to make sure that they're equally efficient as well as effective. So we're talking about that kind of, is it targeting you know, that need? So let's go back to that example of a student that really struggles with transitions. Well, maybe we're going to use a first and then board, which is going to really make sure that they understand what's coming, so what's happening now and what's going to happen next. But we really need to make sure that it's efficient for them as well. So it might be that for this student that uses an iPad for communication aid, I'm actually going to make sure that those supports are available on their communication aid at all times, because that's going to be with them wherever they go. So making sure that it's really there and available. We want to make sure that we encourage the transition of responsibility onto the user. So as well as kind of supporting those behaviours, we are trying to work on increasing that independence from that user. So we want them to be actively finding these supports and using them independently. Over time, obviously, it's going to take time to get that. We can't expect them to pick it up straight away. And then finally, we want to make sure that we're improving the quality of life as those behaviours decrease. So the aim here is that we're really trying to ease some of those difficulties that some of our learners go through. And as we do that, and as we use these supports more regularly, that we're going to help decrease those behaviours, which in turn will increase their quality of life. So I hope you found that useful today. There are a couple of things that I wanted just to note. We've done a webinar on using the Boardmaker Student Centre. So I think hopefully we've got a link to that in the chat. And so I definitely recommend going to check that out if you want to find out a little bit more about that. We've put some different links into finding those resources and pathways. So hopefully you'll be able to find those and use those tools that we've talked about today. So I'm going to end the session here. So thank you very much for joining, and hopefully see you at the next session.